Howdy do, sweet squirrels. Listening squirrels. We're ready for chapter 9, part 2. Okay, I read the last thing was, "My darling, I will." The glow which had risen to his face was reflected in hers, for at that moment it seemed as if it would be possible to love this cousin, who was so willing to be led by her, and so much needed some helpful influence to make a noble man of him. The thought came and went like a flash, but gave her a quick heart throb, as if the old affection was trembling on the verge of some warmer sentiment, and left her with a sense of responsibility never felt before. Obeying the impulse, she said with a pretty blending of earnestness and playfulness, "If I wear the bracelet to remember you by, you must wear this to remind you of your promise." "And you," whispered Charlie, bending his head to kiss the hands that put a little white rose in his buttonhole. Just at that most interesting moment they became aware of an arrival in the front drawing-room, whither Aunt Plenty had discreetly retired. Rose felt grateful for the interruption because, not being at all sure of the state of her heart as yet, she was afraid of letting a sudden impulse lead her too far. But Charlie, conscious that a very propitious instant had been spoiled, regarded the newcomer with anything but a benignant expression of countenance, and whispering, "Goodbye, my Rose. I shall look in this evening to see how you are after the fatigues of the day." He went away with such a cool nod to poor Funcy that the amiable Asiatic, it was divided, thought he must have mortally offended him. Rose had little leisure to analyze the new emotions of which she was conscious, for Mr. Tokio, Tokio, came up at once to make his compliments with a comical mingling of Chinese courtesy and American awkwardness, and before he got his hat on, Jamie shouted with admiring energy, "Here's another! Oh, such a swell!" They now came, thick and fast, for many hours, and the ladies stood bravely at their post till late into the evening. Then Aunt Jessie went home, escorted by a very sleepy little son, and Aunt Plenty retired to bed, used up. Dr. Alec had returned in good season, for his friends were not fashionable ones, but Aunt Myra had sent up for him in hot haste, and he had good-naturedly obeyed the summons. In fact, he was quite used to them now, for Mrs. Myra, having tried a variety of dangerous diseases, had finally decided upon heart complaint as the one most likely to keep her friends in a chronic state of anxiety, and was continually sending word that she was dying. One gets used to palpitations as well as everything else, so the doctor felt no alarm, but always went and prescribed some harmless remedy with the most amiable sobriety and patience. Rose was tired but not sleepy, and wanted to think over several things, so instead of going to bed, she sat down before the open fire in the study to wait for her uncle and perhaps Charlie, though she did not expect him so late. Aunt Myra's palpitations must have been unusually severe, for the clock struck 12 before Dr. Alec came, and Rose was preparing to end her reverie when the sound of someone fumbling at the hall door made her jump up, saying to herself, "Poor man, his hands are so cold he can't get his latchkey in. Is that you, Uncle?" she added, running to admit him, for Jane was slow, and the night as bitter as it was brilliant. A voice answered yes, and as the door swung open, in walked, not Dr. Alec, but, guess who? Charlie, who immediately took one of the hall chairs and sat there with his hat on, rubbing his gloveless hands and blinking as if the light dazzled him, as he said in a rapid, abrupt sort of tone, "I told you I'd come, and left the fellas keeping it up gloriously, going to see the old year out, you know, but I promised, never break my word, and here I am. Angel in blue, did you slay your thousands? Hush, the waiters are still about. Come to the study fire and warm yourself. You must be frozen, said Rose, going before to roll up the easy chair. Not at all. Never warmer. Looks very comfortable, though. Where's Uncle? Asked Charlie, following with his hat still on, his hands in his pockets and his eye fixed steadily on the bright head in front of him. Aunt Myra sent for him, and I was waiting up to see how she was, answered Rose, busily mending the fire. Charlie laughed and sat down upon a corner of the library table. Poor old soul, what a pity she doesn't die before he's quite worn out. A little too much ether some of these times would send her off quite comfortably, you know. Don't speak that way. Uncle says imaginary troubles are often as hard to bear as real ones, said Rose, turning around displeased. Till now she had not fairly looked at him, for recollections of the morning made her a little shy. His attitude and appearance surprised her as much as his words, for the quick change in her face, it seemed to remind him of his manners. Getting up, he hastily took off his hat and stood looking at her with a curiously fixed yet absent look as he said in the same rapid, abrupt way, as if, when once started, he found it hard to stop. I beg pardon, only joking, very bad taste, I know, won't do it again. The heat of the room makes me a little dizzy, and I think I got a chill coming out. It is cold, and I am frozen, I dare say, though. I drove like the devil. Not that bad horse of yours, I hope. I know it's dangerous, so late and alone, said Rose, shrinking behind the big chair as Charlie approached the fire, carefully avoiding a footstool in his way. Danger is exciting, that's why I like it. No man ever called me a coward. Let him try it once. I never give in, and that horse shall not conquer me. I'll break his neck if he breaks my spirit doing it. No, I don't mean that. Never mind, it's all right. And Charlie laughed in a way that troubled her because there was no mirth in it. Have you had a pleasant day? Asked Rose, looking at him intently as he stood pondering over the cigar and match which he held, as if doubtful which to strike and which to smoke. Day? Oh, yes, capital. About 2,000 calls and a nice little supper at the club. Randall can't sing any more than a crow, but I left him with a glass of champagne upside down, trying to give them my old favorite. 'Tis better to laugh than be sighing, and Charlie burst forth in that bacchanalian melody at the top of his voice, waving an aluminate holder over his head to represent Randall's inverted wine glass. Hush, you'll wake Annie, cried Rose in a tone so commanding that he broke off in the middle of a roulade to stare at her with a blank look as he said apologetically, I was merely showing how it should be done. Don't be angry, dearest. Look at me as you did this morning, and I'll swear never to sing another note, if you say so. I'm only a little gay. We drank your health handsomely, and they all congratulated me, told him it wasn't out yet. Stop, though, I didn't mean to mention that. No matter, I'm always in a scrape, but you'll always forgive me in the sweetest way. Do it now, and don't be angry, little darling. And dropping the vase, he went toward her with a sudden excitement that made her shrink behind the chair. She was not angry, but shocked and frightened, for she knew now what the matter was, and grew so pale he saw it and asked pardon before she could utter a rebuke. We'll talk of that tomorrow. It's late. Go home now, please, before Uncle comes, she said, trying to speak naturally, yet betraying her distress by the tremor of her voice and the sad anxiety in her eyes. Yes, I will go. You are tired, and I'll make it. I'll make it all right tomorrow. And as if the sound of his uncle's name steadied him for an instant, Charlie made for the door with an unevenness of gait which would have told the shameful truth if his words had not already done so. Before he reached it, however, the sound of wheels arrested him, and leaning against the wall, he listened with a look of dismay mingled with amusement creeping over his face. "Brutus has bolted. Now I'm in a fix. Can't walk with this horrid dizziness in my hand. It's the cold, Rose, nothing else. I do assure you. And a chill, yes, a chill. See here? Let one of these fellas there lend me an arm. No use to go after that brute. Won't mother be frightened, though, when he gets home?" And with that empty laugh again, he fumbled for the door handle. No, don't let them see you. Don't let anyone know. Stay here until Uncle comes. He'll take care of you. Oh, Charlie, how could you do it? How could you when you promised?" And forgetting fear and the sudden sense of shame and anguish that came over her, Rose ran to him, caught his hand from the lock, and turned the key. Then, as she could not bear to see him standing there with that vacant smile on his lips, she dropped into a chair and covered up her face. The cry, the act, and more than all, the sight of the bowed head would have sobered poor Charlie if it had not been too late. He looked about the room with a vague, despairing look, as if to find reason fast slipping from his control. But heat and cold, excitement and reckless pledging of many healths had done their work too well to make instant sobriety possible. And owning his defeat with a groan, he turned away and threw himself face downward on the sofa, one of the saddest sights the new year looked upon as it came in. As she sat there with hidden eyes, Rose felt that something dear to her was dead forever. The ideal which all women cherish, look for, and too often think they have found when love glorifies a mortal man, is hard to give up, especially when it comes in the likeness of the first lover who touches a young girl's heart. Rose had just begun to feel that perhaps this cousin, despite his faults, might yet become the hero that he sometimes looked, and the thought that she might be his inspiration was growing sweet to her, although she had not entertained it until very lately. Alas, how short the tender dream had been, how rude the awakening, how impossible it would be ever again to surround that fallen figure with all the romance of an innocent fancy, or gift it with the high attributes beloved by a noble nature. Breathing heavily in the sudden sleep that kindly brought a brief oblivion of himself, he lay with flushed cheeks, disordered hair, and at his feet the little Rose that never would be fresh and fair again, a pitiful contrast now to the brave, blithe young man who went so gaily out that morning to be so ignominiously overthrown at night. Many girls would have made light of a trespass so readily forgiven by the world, but Rose had not yet learned to offer temptation with a smile and shut her eyes to the weakness that makes a man a brute. It always grieved or disgusted her to see it in others, and now it was very terrible to have it brought so near. Not in its worst form by any means, but bad enough to wring her heart with shame and sorrow and fill her mind with dark forebodings for the future. So she could only sit mourning for the Charlie that might have been while watching the Charlie that was, with an ache in her heart, which found no relief till, putting her hands there as if to ease the pain, they touched the pansies, faded but still showing gold among the somber purple, and then 2 great tears dropped on them as she sighed, "Ah me, I do need heart's ease sooner than I thought." Her uncle's step made her spring up and unlock the door, showing him such an altered face that he stopped short, ejaculating in dismay, "Good heavens, child, what's the matter?" Adding as she pointed to the sofa in pathetic silence, "Is he hurt, ill, dead?" "No, uncle, he is," She could not utter the ugly word, but whispered with a sob in her throat, "Be kind to him," and fled away to her own room, feeling as if a great disgrace had fallen on the house. Charlie's drunk. Chapter 10. We'll read tomorrow's, called The Sad and Sober Part. Y'all have a great crafty night, and I'll hope to see you tomorrow live at 5. Dug up some more fiber. I think I showed it to you before, but anyway, I love this combo. It'll make a beautiful something one of these days. Don't forget my Dollar Tree fairy wings here. If you haven't entered all the fairy Christmas in July hashtag Christmas in July Fairies 21, make sure you enter mine unless you're a fairy. And there's a whole bunch more. I haven't checked to see how many, but look for me on the 15th wearing my wings or having them here somewhere with my beautiful Christmas sweater that Miss Doris made me from Rose Cottage Studio, only she now has another name. I'd been wondering where she was. Doris, you fooled me. It's Bentley and somebody's mom. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Bye-bye.